The late afternoon sun cast a golden glow over the small diner, its neon sign flickering as customers came and went. Inside, the rhythmic clatter of dishes and the low hum of conversation filled the air. Among the staff rushing from table to table was a young waitress named Lisa. She had been working long shifts, balancing bills and dreams, her warm smile never fading despite the exhaustion in her eyes. On this particular day, as Lisa wiped down a counter, she noticed a man walk in, tall, lean, with a familiar face shadowed by years of experience. At first, she thought she was imagining things, but as he removed his sunglasses and scanned the menu, her heart skipped a beat. It was Clint Eastwood, the legendary actor and director known for his steely gaze and unforgettable performances. Lisa had seen his movies growing up, never once thinking she'd be serving him a cup of coffee in her little corner of the world. Her hands trembled slightly as she approached his table, but she quickly composed herself. "Good evening, sir. What can I get for you?" she asked with her usual warmth. Clint looked up, his piercing blue eyes meeting hers, and gave a small smile. "Just a black coffee and whatever you'd recommend." Lisa nodded, writing down the order with practiced ease. As she walked away, she couldn't help but steal another glance at him. He seemed quiet, thoughtful. Nothing like the tough, no-nonsense characters he played on screen. Something about him felt different, like there was a story behind those eyes. As the evening went on, Lisa made sure Clint was comfortable, checking in every now and then, not wanting to disturb him but also not wanting to miss the chance to interact with a legend. He was kind, polite, and even cracked a joke when she refilled his coffee. The conversation was brief, but for Lisa, it was unforgettable. When Clint finally asked for the check, Lisa quickly brought it over, still in disbelief that she had just served one of Hollywood's biggest stars. But as she turned to leave, he stopped her. "Wait a second," he said, reaching for a pen. He scribbled something on the receipt, folded it, and handed it to her with a nod. "You take care, all right?" Lisa smiled, assuming it was a generous tip or maybe even an autograph. "Thank you, Mr. Eastwood," she said sincerely. She slipped the note into her pocket and continued with her shift, waiting until she had a moment to read it. Later that night, as she sat in the break room, she finally unfolded the note. The moment her eyes scanned the words, her breath caught in her throat. Her hands trembled. A lump formed in her throat. Tears welled up in her eyes, spilling onto the paper. What had Clint Eastwood written that moved her so deeply? What could a simple note from a stranger possibly say to bring her to tears? Stay with me, because this story is about to take a turn no one saw coming. Lisa's fingers tightened around the note as she blinked through the tears, her heart pounding in her chest. She read the words again, just to make sure she wasn't imagining them. But they were real, staring back at her in neat, deliberate handwriting. A message from Clint Eastwood himself. Her breath was shaky as she folded the note back up and held it close. She wanted to tell someone, to share what had just happened, but at the same time, she felt like this moment was too personal, too overwhelming to put into words just yet. Instead, she sat there in silence, letting the emotions wash over her. For years, Lisa had worked tirelessly at this small diner. It wasn't just a job, it was her survival. She had grown up in tough circumstances, learning early on that life didn't hand out favors. Every dollar she earned went towards rent, food, and supporting her younger brother, James, who still had dreams she didn't want to see crushed by reality. She had put her own aspirations on hold, choosing responsibility over passion, because that's what family did. But in the quiet moments, when the diner was empty and the world felt still, Lisa sometimes let herself dream. She had once wanted to be a writer, pouring her thoughts onto paper, creating stories that could move people the way books had once moved her. But life had other plans. Bills came first, survival came first, and so, she tucked her dreams away like old photographs, still there but fading. As she sat in the break room, Clint Eastwood's note felt like a spark in the darkness. But why? What was it about those words that made her feel like something had shifted, like a door she thought was locked had just creaked open? The sound of the break room door swinging open jolted Lisa from her thoughts. It was her coworker, Maria, coming in to grab her things before heading out. "You okay?" Maria asked, noticing Lisa's red-rimmed eyes. Lisa hesitated, glancing at the note again. "Yeah, just long day," she said, forcing a small smile. Maria sighed. Tell me about it. Hey, did you see who was here earlier? I swear, that guy looked just like Clint Eastwood. Lisa let out a soft chuckle, still trying to process it all. Yeah, it was him. Maria's eyes widened. No way. Did he tip good? Lisa's fingers curled around the note again, but she shook her head with a knowing smile. Something like that. As Maria left, Lisa leaned back against the chair, staring at the ceiling, her mind racing. What was she supposed to do now? Could a few words on a piece of paper really change anything? She didn't have the answers yet, but something deep inside told her that tonight was just the beginning. That note wasn't just a message. It was a door. And for the first time in a long time, Lisa wondered what would happen if she stepped through it. Lisa barely slept that night. Every time she closed her eyes, the words on the note flashed in her mind, filling her with both excitement and confusion. Why had Clint Eastwood written those words to her? Why had he even noticed her at all? She had served thousands of customers over the years, celebrities and ordinary people alike, and yet no one had ever left her feeling like this. It wasn't just a generous tip or a polite thank you, it was something more, something deeper. By the time morning came, Lisa felt a strange mix of exhaustion and energy. She kept the note folded carefully inside her apron pocket as she got ready for another long shift at the diner. The air outside was crisp, the kind that made her pull her jacket tighter around her shoulders as she walked to work. The city was already buzzing. Horns honking, people rushing down sidewalks, lost in their own worries. But for Lisa, the world felt different, like it was nudging her toward something she couldn't quite see yet. As she stepped inside the diner, she was greeted by the familiar scent of coffee and bacon sizzling on the grill. The usual customers were there. Mr. Thompson reading his newspaper in the corner booth, a group of construction workers chatting near the counter, and of course her manager, Rick, already barking orders at the kitchen staff. Lisa, you're late, Rick said without looking up. By 2 minutes, she muttered, tying her apron around her waist. Rick didn't reply, but Lisa could feel his eyes on her as she moved through the diner, greeting customers, refilling coffee, and pretending like everything was normal. But nothing felt normal. She kept thinking about the note, about what it meant, and most of all about what she was supposed to do with it. Later that afternoon, during a rare moment of quiet, she finally unfolded it again, reading Clint's words for what felt like the 100th time. Her hands trembled slightly as she traced the letters with her fingertips. Just then a voice startled her. What's that? Lisa quickly folded the note and looked up to see James standing there, his backpack slung over one shoulder, his expression curious. He had just gotten out of school, and as usual, he had stopped by the diner to see her before heading home. Nothing, she said quickly, but James wasn't convinced. Come on, Lisa, I know that look, he said, sliding into the booth across from her. What's going on? She hesitated, then sighed. Clint Eastwood was here last night, she finally admitted. James's eyes widened. No way.
What?
Did he tip you like $1,000 or something? Lisa shook her head. No, he gave me a note. James leaned in closer. What did it say? Lisa hesitated again. For some reason, she felt protective of those words, like saying them out loud might take away their meaning. But James was her little brother, the one person she trusted more than anyone. She took a deep breath and finally whispered, He told me not to give up. James frowned. On what? Lisa looked down at the note, her heart pounding. That's the thing, she said quietly. I think he meant my dreams. James studied her face for a long moment, then nodded. So what are you going to do about it? Lisa didn't have an answer. All she knew was that for the first time in a long time, she felt like she was standing on the edge of something big. Something scary. Something she wasn't sure she was ready for. But maybe, just maybe, it was time to find out. Lisa couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted inside her. Clint Eastwood's words weren't just sitting on a piece of paper, they were sitting in her mind, growing louder with every passing hour. She had spent so many years believing that dreams were a luxury she couldn't afford, but now, for the first time, she wondered if she had been wrong. The rest of her shift passed in a blur. Customers came and went, orders were taken, plates were cleared, but Lisa's thoughts were somewhere else. She kept thinking about the stories she used to write, the ones she had hidden away in notebooks under her bed. What if she pulled them out again? What if she actually tried? But then, the doubts crept in just as quickly. Who was she kidding? People like her didn't just wake up one day and become successful. After work, she and James walked home together, the city lights flickering around them. James kept glancing at her, clearly waiting for her to say something. Finally, he sighed. "You're thinking about it, aren't you?" Lisa smirked. "Thinking about what?" James rolled his eyes. "Come on, Lisa. I know you. That note did something to you. I can see it." Lisa hesitated, then nodded. "I just don't know if it even matters. I mean, where do I even start?" James stopped walking and turned to her. "You start by believing it's possible." His words hit her harder than she expected. James was just a kid, but sometimes he sounded wiser than anyone she knew. She gave him a small smile, then kept walking. That night, Lisa sat on the floor of her tiny apartment, surrounded by old notebooks. She hadn't touched them in years, but now, she flipped through the pages, her own handwriting staring back at her. Stories she had started but never finished, characters she had created and then abandoned. A version of herself that had once believed in something bigger. Her fingers trembled as she picked up a pen. She wasn't sure what she was about to write, but she knew she had to start somewhere. Just as she pressed the tip of the pen to the page, her phone buzzed. She reached for it absent-mindedly, but when she saw the notification, her breath caught in her throat. An email. From someone she never expected. Her heart pounded as she opened it. She read the first few lines, then read them again, her pulse racing. It was an invitation. An opportunity. A chance. Her hands shook as she scrolled down, barely believing what she was seeing. Clint Eastwood had done more than just leave her a note. Somehow, in ways she couldn't yet understand, he had just changed her life. But was she brave enough to take the next step? Lisa's fingers hovered over the screen, her breath shallow as she reread the email. It was an invitation, an opportunity she never saw coming. A well-known writing program was offering her a spot, something she hadn't even applied for. Confusion twisted in her stomach. How did they even find her? Was this a mistake? Her mind raced back to the note Clint Eastwood had given her. Had he done this? Had he seen something in her? Something she hadn't seen in herself? The thought was overwhelming. It felt impossible, but at the same time, it made sense in a way she couldn't explain. She wanted to be excited, but fear crept in. This wasn't just a casual suggestion. This was real. A real opportunity that could change everything. And with that realization came another. What if she wasn't good enough? What if she failed? James burst into the room, breathless. "Lisa, you're not gonna believe this." She looked up, still holding her phone tightly. "What?" He handed her his own phone. "Check this out." She stared at the screen, her heart skipping a beat. A news article. The headline sent a chill through her. Clint Eastwood's unexpected visit. A quiet gesture with a hidden meaning? Lisa's stomach flipped. Her hands trembled as she scrolled through the article. Someone at the diner must have talked. Maybe a customer had recognized him. Maybe a reporter had gotten wind of the visit. But what caught her attention wasn't just the fact that the media knew. It was the speculation. The article hinted that Clint's visit to the small diner wasn't random. That he had been looking for someone. That he had left something behind. Something more than just a note. Lisa felt lightheaded. She had assumed this was just a strange, wonderful moment in her life, but what if it was bigger than that? What if there was something she didn't know? Her phone buzzed again. Another email. This time, from an unknown sender. The subject line made her breath hitch. "You don't know the full story. But you need to." Lisa's hands shook as she clicked it open. The message was short. "Meet me tomorrow at noon. There's something you need to hear. It's about Clint, and it's about you. Don't ignore this." No name. No details. Just those words. Lisa's pulse pounded in her ears. Was this a joke? A scam? Or was it something else? She looked at James, her voice barely above a whisper. "Something's going on." James frowned. "Lisa, what if this is serious?" She swallowed hard, her mind racing. She had thought the note was the turning point, that the email was the moment everything changed. But now she realized this was just the beginning. Lisa barely slept that night. The email haunted her, filling her with questions she couldn't answer. Who had sent it? What did they mean by the full story? And more importantly, what did Clint Eastwood have to do with her? She replayed every moment from that night at the diner, searching for something she might have missed. But there was nothing. Just a quiet man, a kind note, and an overwhelming feeling that somehow her life was about to change. The next day, Lisa arrived at the meeting spot, a small cafe on the other side of town. She had told James where she was going just in case. As she sat at a corner table, she kept glancing at the door, her nerves making it impossible to sit still. Then a man walked in, older, well-dressed, but with a face that carried years of untold stories. He spotted her immediately and approached. "Lisa." She nodded slowly. "Who are you?" The man took a seat across from her and let out a breath. "My name is Robert. I used to work closely with Clint Eastwood, and I need to tell you why he came to see you." Lisa's pulse quickened. "Why?" Robert hesitated for a moment, then leaned in. "Because he knew your mother." The words hit Lisa like a punch to the chest. "What?" Robert nodded. "A long time ago, before Clint was a big name in Hollywood, he crossed paths with your mother. She helped him during a tough time. He never forgot that." Lisa's mind was spinning. Her mother had passed away when she was young. She had no memories of her beyond a few faded photographs. And now, a stranger was telling her that Clint Eastwood had known her? Robert continued, "He's been looking for you for a while, Lisa. He didn't want to just throw money at you or make a grand gesture. He wanted to remind you of something your mother believed in." Lisa's throat tightened. "What was that?" Robert smiled gently. "That you were meant for more." Tears burned in Lisa's eyes. She had spent her whole life struggling, believing she had to fight for every inch forward. And now, she was learning that someone she had never even met, had been watching over her from a distance. Not out of pity, but out of respect for the woman who had once helped him. Lisa wiped her eyes and took a deep breath. "And the email? The writing program? That was him too, wasn't it?" Robert nodded. "He wanted to give you a choice. To remind you that your dreams still matter." Lisa looked down at her hands, her heart pounding. Everything she thought she knew about her life had just shifted. She had spent years believing she was alone, that she had to make it on her own. But now she realized she had never been forgotten. Someone had believed in her all along. And now it was time to believe in herself. Lisa sat there in silence, letting Robert's words sink in. The weight of it all pressed against her chest. The years of struggle, the doubts, the nights she had convinced herself that dreams were just for other people. But now everything had changed. Clint Eastwood had gone out of his way to remind her of something she had nearly forgotten. She had worth, and her story mattered. She looked up at Robert, her voice barely above a whisper. "Why didn't he just tell me?" Robert smiled gently. "Because he wanted you to find it on your own. He believed that if you saw it for yourself, it would mean more." Lisa exhaled, staring at the coffee cup in front of her. She thought about the note, the email, the article. How one small moment had set everything in motion. And now here she was, sitting across from a man she had never met, learning that her past and her future were more connected than she had ever imagined. She thought about her mother. She had always been a mystery, a distant memory that Lisa had never been able to reach. But now, knowing that her mother had once helped someone like Clint Eastwood, knowing that kindness had been remembered decades later, it made Lisa feel closer to her than ever before. A deep sense of gratitude filled her, not just for Clint's quiet generosity, but for the reminder that kindness has a way of circling back, even when we least expect it. Robert checked his watch and stood up. "I should get going. But before I do, there's one last thing." He reached into his pocket and slid an envelope across the table. "Clint wanted you to have this." Lisa hesitated before picking it up. The paper felt thick in her hands, like whatever was inside carried more than just words. She slowly opened it, her eyes scanning the handwritten note inside. "Lisa, your mother once helped me when I needed it most. She didn't ask for anything in return, just believed in me when I was still figuring things out. I never forgot that. I see that same strength in you. Don't let the world convince you that you're not enough. You are. Keep going. Clint." Tears slipped down Lisa's cheeks. It wasn't about money or fame. It wasn't about luck. It was about belief. She folded the letter carefully, pressing it against her chest for a moment before slipping it back into the envelope. She looked at Robert and nodded. "Tell him thank you." Robert smiled. "I think he already knows." That night, Lisa sat at her small desk, a notebook open in front of her. But this time, she wasn't staring at blank pages, wondering if she had anything to say. This time, she picked up her pen and started writing. Because for the first time in her life, she truly believed that her story was worth telling.